You don't need this room anymore. She said it like she was talking about some old coat I should have thrown out years ago. Just a sentence, dropped mid-step, as she walked past me in the hallway with a box in her arms. I stood there barefoot, holding a laundry basket, watching my daughter carry my winter blankets out of the bedroom I'd slept in for over 30 years. The room with the south-facing window and the oak wardrobe Derek built for me the year we married. The one I kept polished even after he passed. "Excuse me?" I asked, setting the basket down. Linda didn't look at me. She was focused, brisk, like she always is when she's made up her mind. "I'll explain later. We're just moving a few things for now." We. Her and that husband of hers, Paul. I'd heard him thumping around up there earlier. They'd come by for coffee, she said on the phone. I'd even baked that almond cake he likes. I thought it was just a visit. By the time I reached the bedroom door, 3 more boxes were stacked neatly in the hallway. My books, my photographs, my clothes. "Linda." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "What is going on?" She turned toward me, her expression softening slightly. "Mom, you don't need such a big room anymore. You barely use it. You sleep, that's all. It makes more sense if we turn it into an office for me. The light's better here. And we're setting up the small upstairs room for you. Paul already brought in your mattress." I blinked. "Upstairs? You mean the storage room?" Linda tilted her head, smiling like she was explaining something simple to a child. "It's not a storage room anymore. We cleared it out. It'll be cozy once we set it up. There's even space for your chair." I wanted to laugh. That room had a sloped ceiling and one tiny window. It was cold in winter, stuffy in summer. I used to keep Christmas decorations and old tax files in there. I stared at her, searching her face for some flicker of shame or hesitation. There was none. "It's not permanent," she added too quickly. "Just while we get the business going, I need a proper space to meet clients." Clients. That word again. Ever since she started calling herself a consultant, everything became about clients, and space, and image. "And you didn't think to ask me?" I asked. She made a face, annoyed. "Mom, don't be dramatic. It's still your house, technically, but let's be real. You never say no to anything. You want to help. I know you." She brushed past me again, hands full of file folders now. I watched her walk into my room, and place them on the dresser like it was already hers. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I picked up the laundry basket and went up the narrow stairs to the attic room. The mattress was on the floor, covered in my old quilt. My chair, my good reading chair, was squeezed into the corner under the slanted ceiling. A small lamp stood on a crate, pretending to be a nightstand. My slippers had been set by the door. Someone had tried to make it look welcoming. Maybe it was Kim, my granddaughter. She still had that softness. She texted me last week, asking if I wanted to go see a movie. I'd said no. I was tired. Maybe I shouldn't have been. I stood in that cramped, dusty room, holding the warm laundry against my chest like a shield. I wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding, that Linda would come up in a moment and laugh and say it was all a joke. But she didn't. Downstairs, I heard her opening drawers, shifting things, making phone calls. Her voice carried upward, clear and assertive. She was already talking about her office setup. I folded the laundry carefully and placed it on the mattress. Then I sat down in my chair, knees aching, and looked around. This is what it came to. I'd raised her in this house, cooked meals, stayed up during fevers, worked double shifts to pay for her college when Derek died, and there was no insurance. And now I was being downsized, quietly relocated. like old furniture. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long orange shadows through the attic window. I sat there, motionless, as if moving would make it more real. I heard Paul laughing downstairs. Then, footsteps up the stairs. A knock. "Hey," Kim's voice. "Grandma, you okay?" I swallowed. "I'm fine, sweetheart." "You sure? Mom said you're moved in. I brought your tea mug up." She pushed the door open and handed it to me. I took it with a shaky hand. "Thanks, dear." She paused, glancing around the room. Her eyes lingered on the mattress, on the crates. "It's temporary, right?" she asked. I nodded. "That's what they said." Kim bit her lip and looked down. "Let me know if you need anything, okay?" "I will." She left, closing the door gently behind her. I held the mug in my lap. It was warm, faintly smelled of peppermint. I stared at the closed door for a long time, until the house settled into night and I heard nothing but the creaking of the old roof above me. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from the backache or the noise, but from the quiet understanding that something had shifted, and not by accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. The smell of paint woke me before the sun did. I hadn't asked for an alarm clock. I hadn't needed one in years. But the scent, sharp and chemical, crept under the attic door, into my nose, and pulled me from what little sleep I'd managed to find. I sat up slowly. My hips protested. The mattress had no give, and the floor underneath offered nothing but cold. The mug from last night was still on the crate, the tea inside it untouched and long since gone bitter. For a moment, I told myself it must be a neighbor, a renovation maybe, something far away. Then I heard Paul's voice downstairs. "We should let it dry for a full day before moving in the desk." The desk? I stood up, knees stiff, and opened the attic door. From the landing, I could see directly into what used to be my bedroom. The door was wide open. Inside, the walls, once a soft cream, were now a glossy white. The old curtains had been taken down. My bed was gone. My dresser, too. In their place, plastic-covered floors, a stepladder, and 2 open paint cans. Linda was there, hair tied up, barefoot, holding a paint roller with a determined look on her face. "Morning, Mom," she chirped, as if we were in the middle of a cheerful DIY project together. "Hope we didn't wake you. We started early." I didn't answer. My eyes scanned the room, searching for any trace of what had been mine. There were none. "Where are my things?" I asked. "Oh, all taken care of," she said breezily, dipping the roller into the tray. "We moved the rest up last night while you were asleep. Closet stuff, too. You've got your own space now. It's all yours. That room upstairs is so private. No noise. You'll sleep better, I promise." I looked at her and wondered, not for the first time, if she actually believed what she was saying. If she genuinely thought I should be grateful. Paul appeared from the hallway with a brush in his hand. "Your old bed didn't fit the new aesthetic, Mrs. Holt," he said with a grin. "We put it in the garage for now. Might donate it later." Donate it. It wasn't just a bed. It was the last thing Derek touched before he died. He'd built that headboard with his own hands, sanded every edge, engraved our initials underneath like some teenage boy. I used to run my fingers over those letters every night, like a prayer. Linda noticed the silence. "Mom, don't look like that. You always say the house is too big, too much to clean. We're just streamlining things, making life easier for everyone." Everyone. Meaning herself? I turned away, back toward the attic stairs. My hand gripped the railing harder than it needed to. The paint smell followed me all the way up. In the attic room, I sat on the mattress and stared at the boxes they'd neatly stacked along the wall. Martha's winter coats, one read. Martha's sewing. Martha's photo albums. The names written in Linda's precise handwriting. All cataloged, all contained. I opened the photo albums box and pulled out one at random. Inside was our trip to the coast, Derek, me, and Linda at 10 years old. Her hair in braids, sand stuck to her knees, a plastic bucket in her hands. She used to call me Mama then, not Mom, not Mother, just Mama, soft and innocent. I closed the album. I wasn't crying. I didn't feel sad. What I felt was something colder, heavier, a word I hadn't allowed myself to think in a long, long time. Disposable. That's what I was now. The silent housekeeper, the invisible grandmother, the one who helped, who smiled, who paid, but didn't belong. I reached for the cardigan on the chair, my old one with the fraying sleeves. I'd worn it for 20 years, and it still held its shape better than most things in this house. I slipped it on, picked up my bag, and slowly made my way back downstairs. Linda was now on the phone in the kitchen, gesturing toward paint samples spread on the counter. She didn't notice me pass. Paul was outside, talking to someone about furniture delivery. I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. The morning was clear, a thin wind brushing through the trees. The mailbox stood crooked as ever, the paint peeling like always. The maple tree we planted when Linda was born had dropped half its leaves. Its shadow stretched across the lawn. I hadn't noticed the seasons changing. I walked down the porch steps, still creaky, still needing repair, and turned toward town. Not fast, not dramatic, just walking. A woman with stiff joints and a head full of questions. Halfway down the block, I took out my phone and tapped a number I hadn't used in a while. The bank answered on the third ring. "Mrs. Holt," said the woman, cheerful as ever. "What can we do for you today?" I cleared my throat. "I'd like to check the status of a few standing payments," I said, "and talk about adjusting them." The banker's office smelled faintly of paper and air conditioning, too cold for October, too tidy for comfort. I sat across from a woman young enough to be my granddaughter, watching her type on a keyboard with perfect, polished nails. Her name tag read Tanya. Her lipstick matched the neat folder she'd placed in front of me. "Your standing payments," she said, turning the screen toward me, "include monthly transfers to your daughter, Ms. Linda Gable, and a savings contribution for your granddaughter Kimberly." I nodded. "And how much goes to Linda exactly?" She hesitated, eyes scanning. "Currently, $200 a month. For household support. Labeled shared living expenses." "Shared," I repeated, letting the word linger. Tanya offered a polite smile. "Would you like to change the amount?" "I'd like to cancel it altogether." She blinked, then straightened in her chair. "Completely?" "Yes." "And the savings contribution?" "That stays," I said. "But I want it renamed, under Kim's full name. Private access. Can you arrange that?" "Of course," Tanya replied, quickly typing notes. "You'll just need to sign off here and here." I picked up the pen. $200 a month for the privilege of being told where I'm allowed to sleep. For being spoken to like a child in my own house. For watching my belongings get boxed and sorted as if I'd already passed on. My hand didn't tremble as I signed. It felt steady. Final. "Anything else I can help with, Mrs. Holt?" I thought for a moment. "Yes. Can I get a printout of all transfers to Linda from the past 10 years? She didn't hide her surprise, but nodded. While she went to the back, I glanced at my reflection in the glass partition. Short gray hair, pressed cardigan, no makeup. A face that people pass by. A face that blends into the background. Derek used to say I had the calm kind of beauty, the kind that didn't shout. But maybe that was the problem. I never shouted, never pushed back. 10 minutes later, Tanya returned with a thick stack of papers, clipped and labeled. All transfers, as requested. I took them in both hands. The folder had weight. Real, undeniable weight. 10 years. 10 years of groceries, bills, school trips, credit card bailouts, roof repairs, and just a little help this month, Mom. 10 years of me stepping in, stepping up, stepping aside. And now I slept above the insulation and the rats. I thanked her and left. The wind had picked up outside. Leaves danced across the sidewalk, brittle and dry. I walked slowly, folder tucked under my arm, heels clicking on the concrete like punctuation marks, to thoughts I hadn't spoken aloud in years. Back home, Linda's car was gone. So was Paul's. A sticky note on the fridge read, "Went to Furniture Depot. Don't forget to take your pill. L." I crumpled it and dropped it in the trash. I sat at the kitchen table, folder open, documents spread before me like a map of my own compliance. Every check, every transfer, a timeline of love misunderstood, of obligation twisted. One line stood out. March 2018, $3,000. Office Startup Fund. That was when Linda first said she was going independent. I'd given the money the same day, proud of her. She bought a logo, a chair, a new phone, and never once asked how I was managing. I opened the kitchen drawer, found the old yellow notebook I kept for birthdays and grocery lists. I flipped to a blank page and began writing down the numbers, not out of spite, not even out of anger, out of clarity. 26 payments for emergencies, 12 for unexpected bills, 4 labeled simply, "Thanks, Mom." By the time I finished, it added up to more than $90,000. $90,000. Given freely, without question, without a single word of recognition that I, too, had limits. I folded the paper and slid it into the folder, then placed it all in my bedroom drawer. No, not bedroom. Storage closet. I looked around the cramped walls, the low ceiling pressing down, the light barely filtering through the tiny window. This wasn't a room. It was a message. You've had your time. Now step aside. I picked up my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in months. "Beverly's Floral," came the voice, warm and distracted. "This is Bev." "Bev, it's Martha." A pause, then a delighted laugh. "Martha Holt. I thought you'd moved to Florida or died." "Not yet," I said. "I need a favor." "Name it." "You still have that real estate lady in your garden club?" "Joyce?" "Sure. Why?" "I need to talk to her. About listings." Quietly. Bev was silent for a beat, then said, "You thinking about leaving?" "I'm thinking about living." Bev didn't ask questions. That's why I called her. By evening, she'd sent me Joyce's number and a message that read simply, "She's discreet and good." I waited until the house went still. Linda and Paul were out again, likely celebrating their new workspace. I heard them laugh in the driveway earlier, loading something into the trunk. A rug, I think. I didn't ask. I made myself a cup of tea and took it back upstairs. The attic was colder now. Night crept in through the edges of the window frame where the seal had long since cracked. I pulled a sweater over my cardigan and dialed the number. Joyce Lamb speaking. "Hello, Joyce. My name is Martha Holt. Beverly gave me your number." "Well now," she said warmly. "If Bev sent you, you must be worth knowing." I'm looking to ask a few questions, I said. About property. Quietly. Her voice softened. I can do quiet. We agreed to meet at the corner cafe 2 days later. Not in town, too many eyes, but out by the park where no one I knew would notice me. I wanted information, just that. No decisions. Not yet. But that night, lying on a mattress barely 2 feet off the floor, surrounded by boxes labeled with my name, I began to imagine what it would be like to live alone again. To have my own space, my own lamp beside a real bed. To put my slippers where I wanted and not apologize for walking too loud. I thought of Derek, how we used to eat breakfast in our robes, reading the paper. How we danced once in the kitchen while eggs burned in the pan. I'd buried so many parts of myself since he died, one by one, without noticing. And maybe this attic, this insult, was the last nail, or the first spark. The next morning, I rose early. Linda was in the kitchen, typing on her laptop with one hand, stirring oatmeal with the other. "Morning," she said without looking up. "Hope the room's settling." "It's fine," I replied. "I ordered blackout curtains for the window, should be delivered today. Paul said you might want to cut the drafts." She was offering them like a favor, like kindness, after pushing me into that space like a broom into a closet. "That's thoughtful," I said. "I'll keep an eye out." "Can you sign for the delivery if I'm out?" "Of course." I was polite, calm. The same way I used to be with insurance agents and rude customers at the store. The smile that says, "I see you, but I don't owe you anything." After breakfast, I pulled out my folder from the bank. I added the paper where I'd totaled Linda's debts. Then I opened the drawer beneath it. Inside were 2 things I hadn't touched in a year. My old checkbook. Derek's leather planner. I opened the planner first. His handwriting was all over it. Tidy block letters. He used to write everything down. Bills, reminders, little notes to himself like, "Call plumber" or "Buy Martha new mittens." The last entry was from the week before he died. It said, "Monsieur appointment 2:30. Pick up cake after. M." That was me. I closed the book gently and set it aside. Then I opened the checkbook. It still had 2 unused checks inside. I hadn't written one since Linda convinced me to go digital. But some things deserve to be handwritten. I flipped to a fresh page and slowly wrote, "Pay to the order of Kimberly Gable, $50,000. In the memo line, I wrote, "For when you're ready to see people clearly." I didn't know if I'd give it to her. Not yet. But it helped to write it. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. Delivery. I signed without a word. Took the package, blackout curtains in a sterile plastic bag, and placed it at the bottom of the stairs. Let her hang them herself. Linda didn't thank me when she came home, just nodded. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from the cold, but from something else. A kind of restless electricity I hadn't felt in years. At 3:17 a.m., I got out of bed, wrapped myself in my robe, and went down to the living room. I took every photo album off the shelf. Every one. Sat at the kitchen table with them piled around me like proof of something I couldn't quite name. There was one of Linda in braces, grinning on a roller coaster. One of Kim, holding a pumpkin bigger than her head. One of Derek, asleep in the recliner with his hand curled around mine. I paged through them until the sun came up. At 6:42 a.m., I made myself coffee. At 7:10 a.m., I called my lawyer. "Walter?" I said when he answered, groggy. "It's Martha Holt. I need to make a change to my will." Walter hadn't heard from me in over a year, but he didn't sound surprised. "Of course, Martha. Do you want to come into the office, or would you prefer I stop by your home? Not the house, I said firmly. Too many ears. He chuckled gently. Understood. Let's meet here. Today at 3? I agreed and hung up. The sun hadn't fully climbed yet, but I was already dressed. Slacks, a blouse, and the scarf Derek bought me for our 30th anniversary. A deep red silk with tiny roses stitched into the border. I wanted to look like myself again. Not the quiet figure Linda was slowly folding into corners. I left the house before anyone else was up. Took the long route. Watched leaves skip across the pavement like they had somewhere to be. Walter's office hadn't changed. Same brass plaque on the door, same dusty clock above the waiting chairs that never told the right time. He met me at the entrance with a kind smile, his tie slightly crooked. Good to see you, Martha. And you? He offered me coffee, which I declined, then led me into his office and closed the door. All right, he said, sitting. What are we changing? I opened my purse and placed the folder on his desk, the same one from the bank, now thick with documents, notes, and the check I'd written for Kim. I want to remove Linda Gable from the will entirely, I said. Walter's eyebrows lifted just a little. He didn't ask why. And I want to create a conditional trust for my granddaughter, Kimberly. She doesn't get the full amount unless she meets one condition. He reached for a pen. Which is? She has to come see me, not ask for money, not through Linda. Just visit, on her own, of her own will. If that doesn't happen by the time she's 25, the trust dissolves. Walter nodded slowly, scribbling. Unorthodox, but possible. I don't want her punished, I said. She's a good girl, but I want her to choose, not be pulled in by obligation. And your assets? My investments remain in my name. I'll update the beneficiaries. But the house... I paused. The house is no longer theirs to assume. You're thinking of selling? I'm thinking of freeing myself, I said. He looked up at me then, really looked. You sound resolved. I am. He took a few minutes to pull up the old documents, then made the changes. I signed each one deliberately, no hesitation, my name written in pen that didn't tremble. When it was done, he slid the papers into a blue folder and stood to shake my hand. I wish more clients came in this clear, he said. I managed a smile. It took me years to get here. Clarity often does. I left the office lighter than I'd arrived. Not because I had cut someone out of my life, but because I had finally acknowledged the truth of how I'd been living. Linda hadn't stolen anything from me. Not really. I'd handed it over, piece by piece, until I was living in the shadow of my own generosity. By the time I returned home, their cars were back. Linda was in the garden, trimming hedges with too much energy. Paul was on the porch, sipping lemonade like a man who'd found comfort in someone else's castle. Hey, Mom, Linda said without looking up. You vanished this morning. Had errands, I replied. Old ladies need adventures too. She laughed. Well, we were thinking, Paul needs space for his work calls too. Would you mind if we moved some of the attic boxes to the garage? I looked at her, expression blank. You want to make room in the attic? Just temporary. You know how it is. The house is tight. I stepped closer, voice low. The house isn't tight, Linda. The house is full of people who think I owe them room. Her shears stopped midair. I didn't wait for a response. I climbed the stairs, each step feeling a little less steep. Up in the attic, I opened the box labeled Martha's Sewing and took out the small tin where I kept Derek's cufflinks, and the locket he gave me after Kim was born. I wore it that day. Let them pack the attic. Let them shuffle boxes like lives were made of cardboard. Soon enough, they'd have to unpack their assumptions too. And some things, like pride, like consequence, don't fold easily. It was a strange thing, opening drawers I hadn't touched in years. The back of my old writing desk, now shoved into the corner of the attic, held files I'd nearly forgotten. Yellowed paper sleeves, scrawled receipts, thick manila envelopes stuffed with statements. I sat cross-legged on the floor, the desk drawer open like a chest of buried proof. I wasn't looking for anything. Not really. But once I began, I couldn't stop. Check stubs, handwritten notes, $2,500 for Linda, brakes and engine. Kim's school trip, deposit paid. Linda and Paul, furnace repair. Linda, emergency dental, not covered. There were hundreds. I found an envelope labeled Home Equity Loan, 2014, and remembered that call. Linda in tears, saying they'd be on the street if the roof collapsed that winter. I'd signed the papers the next morning. Never told anyone what it did to my savings. The more I read, the more I remembered how small each decision had felt at the time. Tiny kindnesses, a mother's duty, a grandmother's role. But they had stacked like bricks, and now they made a wall I couldn't see over. By midday, the attic floor was covered in slips and pages. I began sorting them into piles. Not out of bitterness, just order. It wasn't until I got to the tax returns that the scale of it landed. In the past 12 years, I'd given Linda and her family over $140,000. Not loans, not investments, just handouts. Help. That word they loved. Help with the mortgage. Help with medical bills. Help with Kim's early tuition. Then her move-in fees, her textbooks, her car. Help, help, help. Not once had any of it come back. Not in repayment, not in thanks. And now they'd taken my room, my privacy, my silence. I pulled the curtains aside and cracked the tiny attic window open. A breeze stirred the loose receipts on the floor. I watched one float up, then settle again. A knock on the attic door broke the moment. "Grandma?" Kim's voice. "Come in, dear." She stepped inside gently, like she wasn't sure she belonged. She looked at the papers. "Whoa." I smiled faintly. "It's just old math." Kim frowned. "Is this all stuff you paid for?" "Yes." She sat down across from me, crisscross on the floor, looking over the piles. "I didn't know," she said softly. "You weren't meant to." She was quiet for a moment, then pulled a folder toward her, flipping through the notes. "Did Mom ask for all this?" "Most of it." She looked up. "And you just gave it?" "Every time." "Why?" I reached out and touched her hand. "Because I loved them. Because I thought they were drowning, and because I never wanted you to feel the cold edge of need." Kim looked away, blinking fast. After a moment, she asked, "Are you mad?" I considered that. "No, not mad. Just done. Done helping? Done being treated like the help." We sat there for a while, the only sound the ticking of the old clock I'd brought up from the kitchen. Finally, Kim spoke again. "I think they assume you'll always say yes." "I know. But what if they're wrong?" I smiled. "They already are." She stared at me, thoughtful. "Grandma, are you planning something?" I didn't answer. But I think she already knew. That evening, Linda didn't come upstairs. Neither did Paul. I could hear them moving around below, doors closing, glasses clinking. A normal evening in a house full of people pretending nothing was breaking. I took one of the folders, sealed it, and slid it into my suitcase. Then I folded the yellow legal pad on which I'd written the full summary. Not for them, for myself. Proof of a life not wasted, but redirected. Proof that love without limits is just a ledger of silence. The shouting began just after breakfast. I was still upstairs folding the last of the summer blouses into a suitcase when Paul's voice rose from the living room like a horn blast, sharp, sudden, and sour. "What do you mean the transfer didn't go through?" Silence followed. Then Linda, lower but tight. "I'm telling you, it's probably a bank error. I'll call them." Another beat. "But that mortgage is due today." So, it had begun. I sat down on the edge of the mattress and waited. 3 minutes later, footsteps pounded up the stairs. Linda didn't knock. "Mom," she said, face already flushed. "Did you change something at the bank?" I didn't answer right away. I watched her take in the open suitcase, the folded sweaters, the papers stacked neatly on the crate I used as a nightstand. "What's going on?" she asked again. I met her eyes. "I canceled the monthly transfer and the overdraft authorization tied to my account." Her mouth opened, then closed, like a fish pulled too fast from water. "You what?" "You heard me." "But why?" She sounded like a child being told the rules had changed after the game had started. Not angry. Not yet. Just baffled. "I'm not paying your bills anymore, Linda, or Paul's, or this house's." "This is your house," she snapped. "No," I said quietly. "This is a house I bought. You made it something else." Her face stiffened. "You said you wanted to help." And I did. I helped. For over a decade. But now I'm done helping people who don't see me. That made her blink. "You think we don't appreciate you? You don't respect me." She folded her arms, jaw clenched. "You're being dramatic." That word again. I stood up, my knees protesting, but I didn't let it show. "You took my room without asking. You cleared my belongings while I stood and watched. You assigned me space like I was an afterthought. You said it was fine. Because I was stunned. Because I've spent too long keeping the peace." She turned away then, pacing. "You could have talked to me. I tried. For years. In small ways. But you never noticed." Her hands went to her hips, her voice rising. "We're under pressure, Mom. Paul's business is just getting off the ground. Kim's tuition is brutal. You know that." "Yes," I said calmly. "And I'm not your insurance plan." That hit. She stared at me, face frozen. "You can't just pull everything without warning." "I can. I did." "And what about this house? What about everything we've built here?" "You built a comfort around someone else's sacrifice," I said. Then I walked to the closet and zipped the suitcase shut. Linda didn't move, didn't speak. I think in that moment she finally saw me. Not as Mom, not as the helper, but as a woman standing in front of her, holding the handle of a bag and the end of an era. I passed her in the doorway. Downstairs, Paul stood at the kitchen table with his phone pressed to his ear. He watched me come down, his eyes flicking to the suitcase. "She's leaving?" he said aloud, not to me, but to whatever imaginary audience lived inside that phone. "No," I said. "I'm arriving." He looked confused. "I'm arriving at the part of my life where I choose." And with that, I walked out the door. The porch creaked beneath my steps, like always. The sky was pale blue, cold, honest. I pulled my coat tighter and kept walking. I didn't need a ride. I needed distance. I checked into the small motel on the edge of town under my maiden name, not because I was hiding, but because I wanted the privacy of not being someone's mother or someone's burden. Just Margaret Jameson. Room 12, ground floor, facing the woods. The room smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and old television sets. The bedspread had tiny flowers on it, the kind I used to sew on pillowcases when Linda was little. There was a kettle, a desk, a quiet lamp. It was perfect. That evening, I turned off my phone and sat with a cup of tea, watching dusk settle behind the trees. I thought I might cry, that some release would come now that I was free of their voices and their schedules. But no tears came, only calm. At 8:47 p.m., there was a knock on the door. I knew who it was before I opened it. Kim stood there in jeans and a hoodie, hair pulled back in a messy bun, eyes red. She was holding a paper bag. "I brought food," she said quietly. "You probably haven't eaten." I stepped aside to let her in. She placed the bag on the table, then stood awkwardly by the chair, hands in her sleeves. "I went home and they were not okay," she said finally. "I imagine not." She looked at me. "Did you mean it? About cutting them off?" "I meant every word." Kim sat down slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're panicking. I think they didn't believe you'd ever actually leave." "That was the point," I said. She was silent for a long time. Then, "Grandma, why didn't you tell me?" "You didn't need to know." "But I live there too." I poured her a cup of tea, pushed it gently across the table. "That's the thing, darling. You don't live there. Not really. Not the way I did. You have a life beyond that house. You'll go away to school. You'll travel. You'll fall in love. I wanted to protect you from all the little cracks." Kim took a sip of tea, then pulled something from her pocket. My check, the one I'd written and tucked into my folder. "I found this," she said, "in the attic, after you left." I waited. She slid it across the table. "I'm not cashing it." "You don't want the money?" "I don't want to earn it like that." I looked at her closely. Her face, so much like Linda's, yet so unlike. The same bone structure, but softer, more open. "I wrote that for a future where you choose better," I said. She nodded. "I'm trying." I reached across the table, took her hand. "You did come," I said. "That's already different." We sat there quietly, the air filled with nothing but the ticking of the motel clock. Then she asked, "What now?" I leaned back. "Now I find a place that's mine." She looked at me, eyes wide. "Like, forever?" "Yes." "You're really not going back?" "No. Not even to visit?" "Maybe one day, but not soon. They need to learn how to sit in the space I left behind." "And what about me?" I smiled. "You're always welcome. Anywhere I go." She didn't cry, though her mouth trembled. Before she left, she hugged me. Not the way she did at holidays, light and polite. This was different, longer, tighter. "Text me when you're settled?" she asked at the door. "I will. And if you need help moving, I'll call you." She hesitated. "I love you, Grandma." "I know," I said softly. "And I love you too." After she was gone, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the check still lying on the table. Then I tore it in half and made another cup of tea. Tomorrow, I would call Joyce again. It was time to go home. Just not the one they thought I'd stay in. Joyce met me at the cafe again, this time with a folder already prepared. She placed it gently on the table between us and said, "I've found 3 listings that might interest you. All quiet neighborhoods. No stairs. Close to the market and pharmacy." I liked her efficiency. We went over them one by one. A small bungalow with a porch swing, a 2-bedroom in a gated senior complex, and a converted cottage near the river. I asked about the details that mattered. Not square footage or granite counters, but things like noise, sun, and what the neighbors were like. When she finished her pitch, she folded her hands and looked at me carefully. "Martha, I don't usually say this to clients, but you're doing something most people never have the courage to." I smiled. "It doesn't feel brave. It feels late. But you did it. That's more than most." She slid a card across the table. "I'll arrange viewings for this week. When you're ready." "I'll call you," I said. She stood, paused, and added gently, "You're not alone in this." I didn't say anything, but that meant more than she probably knew. Later that afternoon, I went for a walk. Not for errands, not to stretch my legs, but just to move forward, one step at a time. I passed houses with trimmed hedges and wind chimes, dogs barking at windows, children chalking up sidewalks with crooked rainbows. I breathed the sharp November air and thought, I could live here, anywhere, really, as long as it's on my terms. I stopped at a bench in a quiet park and sat with the folder on my lap. Around me, the world went about its business. Leaves fell. A jogger passed. A woman walked slowly, hand in hand with a man who leaned on a cane. No one needed anything from me. No one even noticed me. And I liked it. It had been so long since I was just a woman on a bench, unburdened by someone else's list of needs. I opened the folder again and took a longer look at the cottage near the river. It had faded yellow siding and ivy growing along the fence. The kitchen was small, but the window looked out onto trees. It came furnished, modestly, but clean. A single rocking chair on the porch. I touched the picture with my fingertips. There was no attic, no room for just while we figure things out. It was a place for one, and that felt right. When I returned to the motel, I had 3 missed calls from Linda, 2 from Paul. A text from Kim. "They know you're not coming back." I didn't reply. That night, I started packing. Not the way they had packed me. Not rushed, not careless. I folded what I needed into a new suitcase, one I bought with my own money. No tags from a daughter trying to update my style. No notes tucked into the pockets saying, "Don't forget your pills." This time, it was all mine. The next morning, I called Joyce. "I want to see the cottage," I said. "Today?" "Yes. I'll meet you there at 1. I arrived 10 minutes early, waited in the car, looking at the white trim, the small bird feeder, the curtain fluttering slightly in the window. It felt like it was breathing. When Joyce pulled up and opened the door for me, I didn't hesitate. I stepped onto the porch, ran my hand along the wood railing, and stepped inside. There was nothing grand. No marble. No statement chandelier. But there was peace. And peace was the most luxurious thing I'd seen in years. "I'll take it," I said. The sale went through faster than I expected. Joyce handled everything with the quiet elegance of a woman who knew how to untangle lives politely. No signs in the yard, no unnecessary questions, just documents, appointments, and keys. Within 2 weeks, the house was no longer mine. Not the old one, not the one with the attic and the tangled roots of unspoken debts. I signed the papers with a pen I brought myself, a blue one, not the kind they hand you with logos on the side. After that, I spent one last night at the motel, not because I had to, because I wanted the pause. There's a moment, I think, between the old life ending and the new one beginning, where you just sit with your hands folded and your breath held, waiting to know if you've made the biggest mistake of your life or the most necessary choice. I slept like a child that night. No dreams. No weight in my chest. Just sleep. The cottage welcomed me like it had been waiting. Everything fit. My books filled the shelves exactly. My kettle whistled softly on the stove as if it remembered how I liked my tea. The chair on the porch creaked once, then settled, like it had been holding its breath. I placed Derek's planner in the kitchen drawer, my sewing box in the closet, the photo albums, all 4 of them, stacked gently on the side table by the lamp. I didn't bring the boxes Linda packed, left them in the attic, exactly as she'd labeled them. Let her unpack the pieces of me she boxed away. I hung 2 framed photos, one of me and Derek at the lake, one of Kim as a baby. That was enough. No shrines, just touchstones. After everything was in place, I sat at the small dining table and wrote 3 letters. One to Walter, thanking him for handling the estate changes with such care. One to Joyce, enclosing a simple thank you card with a hand-stitched corner I made myself. And one to Linda. Just a short note. Linda, the house is sold. The account is closed. I wish you peace in your future. M. I didn't sign Mom. She hadn't used that word with warmth in a long time. The first morning in the cottage, I woke before sunrise. Birds were just beginning to call. Light trickled through the lace curtains. I lay in bed for a while, listening. No footsteps above me. No doors slamming. No voices through the walls. Just silence. And then the soft rustle of wind through the trees. I made toast, ate it slowly. No one asked me what was for breakfast. No one left dishes in the sink. At 10, Kim called. "Grandma?" "I'm here," I said, smiling into the receiver. "Is it weird?" "No," I said. "It's mine." She was quiet a moment. "Can I come see it?" "Not yet, sweetheart. Soon. Let me settle first." She understood. Before she hung up, she said, "I'm proud of you." That was the first time I'd heard those words in years. Later that day, a car slowed in front of the house. I saw it through the curtains. Linda's. She didn't get out. Just sat there for a while, engine running. Then drove off. I didn't wave. Didn't open the door. Didn't reach for my phone. Some things are better left a distance. Some apologies aren't ready. And some lessons only settle in when no one is watching. I began walking every morning. Not far. Just a stretch down the lane, past the mailbox. Then left where the river began to peek through the trees. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes like an old friend finally speaking. The quiet didn't feel empty here. It felt earned. On the 4th morning, I passed a neighbor. She was trimming roses, her gloved hands steady, a little terrier barking behind the gate. "You're the one who bought Mrs. Elkin's place," she called. "I am." "Pretty little house?" "It is." She looked at me for a second longer than polite conversation required. "You live alone?" "I do." "Good," she said with a nod, turning back to her clippers. "No one to rearrange your life but you." I smiled all the way home. That afternoon, I unpacked the last of my sewing supplies. Derek's mother had taught me to quilt, and I hadn't made anything new in years. Not since the attic became my life. But here, with the light falling across the small dining table just so, I felt the thread pulling me back. I chose blue and rust-colored fabric. Strong colors. Not cheerful. Honest. Each stitch was an exhale. The mail started coming on the 6th day. Not letters. Those would take longer to redirect, but flyers from local shops, menus from restaurants, and one handwritten card with no return address. Inside, a single sentence. "I don't know what to say, but I'm sorry." No signature. I knew the handwriting. I didn't respond. Some wounds need time. Others need silence. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the stars blink into view. I used to do this with Derek, our hands curled together under a single blanket. We never talked much during those nights, just rocked slowly and let the dark hold us. Now I held my own hands, and that was enough. On Sunday, Kim texted, "Can I come today, just for a walk?" I said yes. She arrived alone. No car I recognized, just her and a backpack slung over one shoulder. When she saw the cottage, she grinned. "It suits you." I let her in, showed her the quilt in progress, the bookshelf, the small radio I kept by the window. She ran her hand along the back of a chair and said, "It smells like lemon and books in here." That's all me. We walked by the river for almost an hour. No talk of Linda, no talk of Paul, just trees, birds, water. When we circled back, Kim hesitated at the gate. "Do you think she misses you?" "I think she misses what I gave her." Kim didn't argue. She pulled something from her backpack, my old recipe tin. "I found it under the sink. Thought you might want it." I took it gently. Inside were handwritten cards, yellowed with time. Chicken pot pie, apple crumble, Derek's favorite, molasses cookies. "I thought these were lost," I said softly. "Mom was going to toss them," she replied. I looked at her then, really looked, and I saw it. The split inside her, the love, the confusion, the ache of trying to stand between two people when neither will move. "Sweetheart," I said, "you don't have to fix this. But I want to understand." "You will. One day." She nodded, eyes glassy. Then we sat on the steps, and I held her hand while the wind moved through the leaves, quiet and kind. When she left, she didn't ask to stay, and I didn't offer. She knew the difference now. 3 weeks passed before I heard her voice again, not in person, not over the phone. But through the voicemail, I found one evening, blinking quietly on the little machine I'd brought with me, an old habit I never let go. "Hi, it's me. I didn't expect it to be this quiet without you here. I keep thinking you'll come back or call or—" A pause. "I miss you." Then nothing. No apology. No questions. Just a message full of noise she couldn't name. I didn't return the call. By then, the cottage had become mine in a way the old house never was. I'd rearranged the furniture to suit my habits, moved the lamp closer to the window, hung a wind chime Derek once gave me for no occasion at all. I cooked small meals, ate when I was hungry, not when someone else expected a plate. The air smelled like cinnamon and pine, the kind of home no one decorated for show. One afternoon, while I stitched the final edge of the quilt, a letter arrived, postmarked from the city. Thick envelope. My name written in the round, overly careful handwriting of someone trying to seem formal. I opened it slowly, then sat down to read. It was from a lawyer, not mine, not Walter. Someone representing Linda and Paul. There were no threats, no accusations, just a request to review asset history and potential claims regarding contributions to shared property. In short, they were fishing, looking for a reason to say, "We built that house too." They hadn't, and they knew it. I placed the letter back in the envelope and filed it in a drawer marked "Unnecessary Things." That drawer also held expired coupons, broken rubber bands, and a postcard from a cruise I never went on. Later that night, I called Walter. He wasn't surprised. "I can send a formal response," he said. "But frankly, they don't have a case. You paid for the house, the deeds, the taxes. It's all clean." "I know," I said. "But they'll press." "I know that too." He paused. "Do you want to fight?" "No," I said. "I want them to realize I'm not on their leash anymore. Well, he replied, I'd say they're already choking on the empty space you left behind. I thanked him and hung up. Then I brewed a cup of tea and sat on the porch. The stars were out. Clear, cold. I didn't feel shaken, not even sad. Just finished. Like a chapter that no longer needs editing. The next morning, Kim showed up without warning. I saw her walking up the path, hands deep in her coat pockets, shoulders tight, like she was bracing for wind. I met her at the gate. You okay? I asked. She shook her head. They're getting desperate. There's talk of suing, or guilt tripping, or both. I know. I tried to talk to Mom. She won't listen. Not yet. Will she ever? I looked at her. This girl who still wore her hope like a loose scarf. Too easy to lose. She might. But you can't stand in the path of a storm and hope it rains softer. Kim's eyes welled up. I just wanted them to be better. I know. She wiped her face roughly and let out a breath. I'm sorry. I shouldn't drag this here. You're not dragging anything. You're visiting. That word landed. Visiting. Not staying. Not rescuing. She nodded. Can I come in? Of course. She followed me inside and sat at the table while I poured us tea. Then, without ceremony, she reached into her bag and placed a thick folder between us. What's that? I made copies, she said. Of everything. The bank transfers, the house payments, the renovations you paid for. It's all in there. I looked at her. Why? In case they try to rewrite the story. I touched the folder, then her hand. You don't owe me this. I know, she said. But I need to do it anyway. We drank tea in silence. Then she asked quietly, Does it get easier? Not right away. But one day you stop asking for clarity from people who only speak in control. She breathed that in, sat with it. When she left, she turned at the door and said, They're going to hate this version of me. I smiled. That means you're getting close. The letter came on a Thursday. Not from lawyers this time, from Linda. A real letter, handwritten on lined paper, folded into thirds. No fancy stationery, no embossed monogram. Just her words, for once, not spoken in rush or over noise. I held it in my hands a long while before opening it. It began simply. I don't know how to start this, because everything I say feels small compared to what I did, but I need to try. She went on for 3 pages. Apologies, some careful, some raw. No excuses, though I could see where she struggled not to offer them. She admitted to being blind to how much you gave, how much I assumed, and confessed she didn't think it would ever catch up to us. She called the attic decision a mistake. She called the lawsuit talk shameful. And then she wrote, You raised me to be strong, but I turned that into entitlement. I thought love meant sacrifice without limit. I see now that I treated your patience as permission. I don't know if you'll forgive me. But I'm sorry. The last line stopped me cold. I miss you in the house, but I think what I really miss is the version of myself I believed I was when you still lived here. That was the first honest thing I'd read from her in years. I folded the letter slowly, pressed it flat, and set it in the drawer with Derek's planner. Let it live next to something true. But I didn't answer. Some bridges don't need to be burned, but they do need to be left behind. That night, I made soup. Not for anyone else. Not for a sick child or a demanding man or a guest who stayed too long. Just for me. I sat at the kitchen table in silence, spoon scraping the bowl, and felt the warmth settle through my chest like a blessing. Not loud, not showy, just there. Later, I pulled the quilt from the chair and laid it across my bed. The last square had been stitched earlier that day, rust and gold, sewn through with blue thread. At the center, I'd embroidered a date, the day I left the house. Below it, a name, Martha Holt. I hadn't stitched my own name in anything since before Derek died. Now it was time. Sunday came with soft rain. I opened the window anyway and let the sound fill the rooms. The cottage held it gently, the way an old woman holds a sleeping child. Quiet, firm, certain. Kim texted to say she'd be visiting next weekend, and I told her to bring her appetite. I'd bake. For her, I still would. That afternoon, I walked down to the river. There was a bench there, curved slightly from time, with initials carved into one side. I didn't sit. I just stood, letting the breeze tug at my coat, and watched the water carry everything forward. Leaves, reflections, time. I used to think aging meant shrinking, becoming small, accommodating. But here, with the air full of rain and forgiveness I hadn't needed to request, I realized something else. Aging can also mean returning. To your voice, to your breath, to the place in the world that always belonged to you, quiet, unclaimed, waiting. Some people call that loneliness, but I knew better now. It was space, and I had finally filled it with myself. Winter came early that year. Not bitter, not cruel, just firm. Like a hand on the shoulder reminding you to slow down. The trees outside the cottage let go of their leaves without drama. The river didn't freeze, but it quieted, as if listening inward. I followed suit. My days found a rhythm. Mornings with tea, long walks bundled in wool, afternoons sewing or reading, evenings with stew or warm bread, and nothing but the hush of wind against the window pane. I spoke to Kim once a week. She didn't ask about Linda anymore. I think she'd made peace with the fact that people do not become who we want them to be, just because we love them. That's a hard lesson. Harder still when they raised you. She was building her own strength now, applying to grad schools, volunteering at a local shelter, writing essays that didn't end in apologies. We were both growing differently, separately, but toward each other. Sometimes that's the only direction worth trusting. In early December, a small box arrived by mail. No return address. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was the carved wooden bird that used to sit on the mantel of the old house, a red-breasted robin. Derek bought it at a fair once, said it looked like hope in mid-flight. I'd thought it was gone. Under the tissue was a note in a narrow, careful hand. I didn't deserve to keep this. I hope it belongs to you again. No signature, but I knew. I didn't call. I didn't write. But I placed the bird by the window where the light found it every morning. Some gestures don't need answers. Some are their own quiet repair. A week before Christmas, I baked. Molasses cookies, Derek's favorite, and Kim's too. The kitchen filled with that heavy sweetness, the kind that stays in your clothes, your hair, your memory. I tied them into small parcels with twine, tucked a few into tins. One I delivered to the elderly man down the road, who always waved when I walked by. Another to the librarian who started putting aside books she thought I might like. One more I left on the bench by the river, just because. And one, carefully wrapped, I gave to Kim when she visited that weekend. She sat on my porch, blanket across her knees, biting into the cookie like it held answers. "God, this tastes like my childhood," she said. "It should." She looked around. "You've made it feel like a real home here." "It is." She hesitated, then added, "It feels more like family than where I live." I didn't answer right away. Then, "That's because here, no one has to earn their place." She reached out and took my hand. "You always deserved better," she said. "No," I corrected her gently. I finally realized I already had it. I just hadn't claimed it. Later that night, I lit a single candle and let the room go quiet. Outside, frost lined the porch railing. Inside, everything I needed was within reach. The bird by the window, the quilt on the bed, my name, stitched where no one could erase it. The old woman I saw in the mirror each morning, hair white, spine softer, voice lower, she wasn't someone forgotten or discarded. She was the keeper of a long, hard-earned dignity. There had been years of giving, years of silence, years of thinking that love was something you proved through absence, by taking up less space, asking for less, waiting your turn. No more. I hadn't burned bridges. I'd walked off them, with grace, with purpose. And I had built something better on the other side. Not a new life, but a rightful one. The next morning, I opened the door to a snow-dusted path and clear skies. No messages, no demands, just morning, and enough of it to call mine. Kim called on a Thursday. She didn't ask, "Are you free?" or "Is this a good time?" She just said, "I'm outside." When I opened the door, she stood there holding a bouquet, not store-bought, but clipped from her own yard. Branches with winter berries, a few faded herbs, something silver green I didn't recognize. "For your table," she said. "Something real." I stepped aside. She came in and took off her coat, already knowing where the hooks were. The rhythm of her moving through the cottage felt easy now, like a song we both remembered. She brewed the tea this time, knew where I kept the mugs, didn't ask before lighting the candle on the table. "I have news," she said. I waited. "I got into Columbia." I smiled. She grinned, eyes shining. "They offered housing, a partial scholarship, and it starts in the spring." I reached across the table, took her hand. "You did it. You helped." "No," I said. "I just reminded you could." We drank in silence for a while, then she pulled a folded note from her pocket. "I wrote her back," she said. "Mom." I didn't ask what it said. I told her I love her, but I'm not her shield anymore. My hand tightened around hers. "That's enough." When she left that evening, she hugged me longer than usual. At the door, she paused and looked around. "When I'm older, I want something like this. Not just a place, a space that fits me." "You'll have it." "You're sure?" I smiled. "Because now you know it's worth walking toward, even if you walk alone." She nodded, and then she was gone. I spent the next day quietly. No visits, no errands, just me, my books, the sound of the trees leaning into winter. In the evening, I sat by the window and watched the sun drop behind the river. That's when it hit me. How little I missed the noise, the pushing, the versions of love that came with tally marks and expectations, and how deeply I'd come to love the version of myself that didn't shrink, the version who said no, the version who left, the version who stitched her own name into her own life. I don't tell you this for pity. I don't want sympathy. I tell you this because maybe you're sitting somewhere, on the edge of a too small bed, or in a kitchen that no longer feels like yours, wondering if it's too late to change the story. It's not. I promise you, it's not. We are not just who we've been to others. We are who we allow ourselves to become when no one is looking, when no one is asking, when we choose. And if this story found you in a quiet moment, If it stirred something in you, you already know what to do next. Take the first step. Speak the truth that's been sitting behind your teeth for years. Unpack the box labeled later, and if this meant something to you, share it. Leave a comment. Send it to the woman who needs it most. Because we are not alone. Not when we begin again. Not when we reclaim ourselves. Not even in the quiet. Especially in the quiet. That's when we hear ourselves clearest.